This is the Writing Adventurously workshop at the AuthorTube Writing Conference. Feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. You could include your name, where you're located, and what you write. I won't be doing callouts today, but I'll be sure to check the playback to acknowledge that you were here. Before I get into the Amherst Writers and Artists method of writing, I'll share a quote from Pat Schneider. She's the founder of the method, who wrote Writing Alone and with Others and How the Light Gets In. All over the world, in every culture, human beings have carved into stone, written on parchment, birch bark, or scraps of paper, and sealed into letters their words. Those who do not write stories and poems on solid surfaces, they tell them, sing them, and in so doing, write them on the air. Creating with words is our continuing passion. We dream stories. We make up stories, poems, songs, and tell them to ourselves. All alone, we write. We also write with others. Every time we open our door at the end of a workday and say, "You'll never believe what that bleep said to me today," we create story. I was minding my own business and he got right into my face, and then he said, already we are creating character, voice, suspense, story. It may not be committed to paper, but the artist, the writer, is at work. That's Pat Schneider's words. So for those of you just joining in, I'm Lyndi Allison, a retired teacher who writes fast-paced young adult science fiction and fantasy with magic realism. I also offer writing workshops and retreats at my home, Tranquilo Retreat, and in Panama's natural spaces. You won't need to take notes today because you'll find all of this information on my resource page on my website, tranquiloretreat.com. You'll find the link provided in the description below, and also my email in case you are not with us live or you have questions that you'd like to ask later. You do not have to sign up to receive my email in order to obtain the resources. During this workshop, you'll be asked to participate by providing feedback on the raw writing I read to you. So at that time, please honor the writing by listening with intent and providing your feedback at the end. I'll coach you on the type of feedback we're looking for. I suggest you ask your questions during the question and answer period at the end, as I won't be pausing to answer the questions during the workshop in order to give you as close a representation of an actual workshop as I can. If for some reason I don't get to your question today, you may ask your question in the comments below so others may benefit from the answer, or email me at the address in the description, lynda@thewordtour.com, and I will get back to you. You can also look for me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, or Pinterest. So before we begin with the actual affirmations and practices, I'd like to just take a moment to think about why we write in community. When you write in community, you keep an appointment with yourself and with others, and that inspires your writing in solitude. You become more prolific. Other writers identify what works in the writing. They share their insights, and they understand rejection. When you identify what works in the writing of others, you teach or remind yourself to include it in your own writing. In a community of writers, you might become a mentor, or you might find a mentor. We all have people who are ahead of us on the journey, alongside us and behind us. Writing together builds compassion, and it's a great way to find your tribe who can become your support. And as writers, don't we all know that there are times when we could use a little support? Now, let's get into the method. In the workshops, participants agree to adhere to the affirmations and essential practices. They write to prompts, read their raw writing, receive and give feedback. And these are our affirmations. Everyone has a strong, unique voice, and our workshops are about giving you an opportunity to discover or develop yours. Everyone is born with creative genius. It is intrinsic. Writing as an art form belongs to all people, regardless of economic class or educational level. The teaching of craft can be done without damage to a writer's original voice or artistic self-esteem. And then a writer is quite simply someone who writes. All right, so those are our affirmations. Before we move on to the workshop, I'll share with you the essential practices. And these are used to create a safe space to write where you are free to explore your own writing and listen to each other with respect. So everyone's writing, including the facilitators, yes, the facilitator writes with the participants, is treated with equal respect and value, regardless of what stage they are at in their writing. Writing is kept confidential and treated as fiction. We don't talk about the writing outside the workshop. We provide feedback on the writing and not on the writer. Even when writing nonfiction like memoir, we treat the writing as though we're writing the writing as though it's fiction. Instead of saying, when you ditched school and stole that car in response to the writing, which would address the writer, we say, when the character ditched school and stole that car. Writers don't have to read their work aloud, but we hope they'll feel safe in this space to share what they have written. And then responses to just what written work reflect what's strong and successful. We don't critique at this point. The writing is raw. Instead, we critique after writers have a chance to craft their writing. We write and respond to the writing. But we only talk about what is working in the piece. Perhaps a quirky character shows up who we want to know more about. The writer might have used the five senses, showing us rather than telling us and helping us to feel a part of the scene. The setting might be a character or might reflect the emotions of the characters. Perhaps one word or phrase stands out. Is the piece suspenseful, intense? Does it make you want to read on and find out more? This is the type of feedback we provide. The exercises and responses support the development of literary craft. A workshop may focus on one aspect of craft, like character development, dialogue, emotional responses, or it may be more general. Now, when we provide feedback on a piece and hear what is working in the writing of others, we learn what we're doing well ourselves, or what they are doing well is an example of what we can do as well. So in a typical workshop, you write to a prompt for varying periods of time, often starting at 10 minutes and working your way to 15, 20, or more. A prompt is given and you write for the allotted time. You don't have to write to the prompt. You may write on your work in progress or what is burning in you to put on the page. But keep writing. Don't stop and think. Put your pen to the page. If you're not sure what to write, then write down the prompt or write, I'm not sure what to write, or even write tick, tick, tick. And by the time you do, you will know what to write next. Keep writing until the time is done. You'll be notified when there is 1 minute left. Now, today's workshop isn't typical because we aren't actually writing together, but I will provide a prompt and some raw writing based on a prompt for you to respond to in the chat. After the workshop, feel free to write to the prompt for 10 minutes. If you send me your raw writing at lynda@thewordtour.com, I will respond. I'm going to begin with a poem by the lovely Lisa Reynolds, a Canadian writer of poetry and short stories whose works are published internationally in anthologies, literary journals, and magazines. Like Rebels by Lisa Reynolds. Remember that day we sat on the green junction box outside your home, waiting for movers to haul stuff away. We were like rebels, knocking heels of sneakers against metal sides, while currents hummed below our bumps. Your pigtails braided, my curls flowing free, grape freezies in hand, tongues purple, fingers sticky, laughter between us. Secrets, too, of boys and fantasized kisses. And then our goodbye. Bodies squeezed tight, tears falling, my heart breaking. Until the next day when I saw you at school. Now, I'll ask you to pause your comments in the chat and listen to the first raw write based on the prompt using the first 3 words of Lisa's poem. So this is an example of a prompt that you could use, taking a word or line from a poem. So the first 3 words of Lisa's poem are, remember that day. This is a raw write by Brittany Bryson. So she wrote to this prompt for 10 minutes. So please listen. At the end, comment what is working in this piece, keeping in mind that this is raw writing and has not yet been crafted, so we're not going to critique today. We do that later, after the authors had a time to take their raw writing and craft it. Remember that day I saw you again? It was June, the day before school ended. You walked in, even though you were supposed to have moved, and my heart almost jumped out of my chest. I ran towards you and wrapped my arms around your neck. You gasped and laughed while returning the embrace. I missed you so much. What are you doing here? I asked into her hair. My mom got a hotel last night because she wanted me to finish up the last day of school. I didn't think I was going to be here. She pulled away, but we stayed close. Come with me, I said excitedly, grabbing her hand in mine, pulling her down the hallway. Where are we going? She laughed. It's a surprise. We raced through the halls and burst open through the back door where the field and playground was. We ended up at a big, tall oak. I pulled out the keychain from my backpack and found my house key. Let's carve our initials into the tree so we can always remember our time together at school, I suggested. Yeah, she replied. And in case I miss you, I can come and visit this spot, I said as a tear welled up in my eye. She grabbed my key and started to carve her initials. RV, Rebecca Verisim. She passed me the key and I carved mine. MR, Michelle Ricardo. I stood back and looked at our work. I placed my finger on the tree and traced over the letters. Wow, that looks so cool, Rebecca said. She flung her arm over my shoulder. When my mom would read me Anne of Green Gables at night before bed, I knew Rebecca was my bosom friend, like Diana to Anne, the most special person I've ever known. Losing her to another school an hour away was like I was saying goodbye before she died. The ache in my chest stealing the beats of my heart like the air was thin and each breath harder and harder to take. Okay. So now tell me, what is working in this piece? Is there a word or phrase that stood out to you? Did it evoke an emotion? Okay. Yes, thank you, Jenna. I agree. The dialogue pulls at hearts. I was certainly feeling it for sure. I think what I have really enjoyed in this piece was the young voice. One of the great things about um, learning to discover your own unique voice is if you write in the voice of childhood. And I certainly could hear the voice of the writer in this particular piece. There were some particular phrases that stood out to me as well. And of course, that real heartache at the end, the ache in my chest, stealing the beats of my heart, like the air was thin and each breath harder and harder to take. Felt like I was very much a part of this scene. And the writer, even in the raw write, was able to draw us into the piece. And from Jenna, yes, we do mostly hear about people carving into trees when they are younger, up to young adults. In many cultures, that carefree pain. And what a great way for the character in the piece to be able to have something memorable, something that she could go back to remember this person who is moved and it sounds like is ultimately going to die. It feels to me like there's a whole story around this piece and that we've just honed in on one moment in it. And for me, I certainly wanted to read more. Okay, so now I'm going to read a second piece. In this case, this is my 10-minute raw write based on the prompt. So I'll read that to you. And and since there are very few of us in the live stream right now due to technical glitches, we'll do our best to speak to what is working in the piece. Remember that day you skipped class? You took yourself to the back field when no one was looking. You'd heard there was an underground room behind the crabapple tree where the cool kids hung out after school. 3 steps past the trunk, you found the concrete door on the ground. You bent your knees, pulled up the patio stone, and gazed into the darkness. Before you could chicken out, you dove head first and landed on your shoulder with a thud. Ouch! You stayed there trying to suck in air, smelled damp earth. Was it mold? No, more like Grandpa's shirt after he dug in his spring garden. Your pupils adjusted, and you reached out your hand to the empty space with the floor, ceiling, and walls. There was only one way to go. Roots tickled your face like creepy, crawly bugs, the ones your brother used to tease you with. Crawling, hands moving like feet across the rich soil, the tunnel grows narrow. Your new khakis marred with mud, your suede slush puppies scraped at the toes. When you reached the corner, you twisted your body, wondering how the big cool kids squished small enough to make the turn. Here, the walls disappear into a dark open space. You found it. You're in the cool kids' room. A match ignites into a flame, setting the darkness ablaze with light. You scooch back. Your brother sits, his back against the dirt wall, creepy roots hanging around him like tinsel. He brings the flame to the tip of his cigarette. Do you want to learn how to smoke? Okay, so that's the second reading based on that prompt. So now, for the few of us who are in in the room, that being Jenna and I, we're going to respond to the writing. Okay, so Jenna has shared the details are on point in some cases. The adjusting pupils was a good focus. Okay, thank you, Jenna. Again, for me, I like the young voice. Learning to discover my own unique voice has been a challenge for me. So, writing in the voice of childhood can help me connect to my own and discover my own voice. So, I think I would find this helpful in the developing of my creative voice. Okay, so both Brittany and I wrote to this using this young voice, similar to that which was in the poem, but we didn't have to. We could have gone in any direction. And that's the great thing about a writing workshop. Often, once there is a prompt, everyone goes in a different direction, and every piece has something that we can find that is working in the writing. So it's a great way to have yourself affirmed in what you're doing well, and then learn from others that there are other things that we can build into our piece. So this is a glimpse into an AWA writing workshop. If you write and people listen to and respond to your writing, and you respond to the writing of others, you will know the benefit of having held space for you. You can find many AWA facilitators on the amherst.org website, or you may write to me to express an interest in attending a free introductory workshop at lynda@thewordtour.com. Typically, my introductory workshops have 5 to 10 participants. My paid workshops can be individual or a group of 5 to 10 participants. So now is our question and answer time. And you can also comment on any additional comments. Thank you, Andrea. This type of exercise I have found can help in different situations. You know, it helps when we're writing in community and writing together, but also, I often hear on Facebook's groups how people are saying, I'm stuck. I don't know how to start, or I've been writing in my work in progress, and I don't know where to go. I'm really not sure where the piece is going. So, even on your own, you can give yourself that writing prompt and a time to write. And, if you give yourself permission to just write what you need to write without, being concerned about how great it is, then you have something on the page, something that you can craft, and something that may or may not become a part of your future writing. For me, writing to prompts on my own and in community have helped me write poetry, flash fiction, personal essays, some of which have been submitted. And it's certainly helped in the writing of my Summer Triangle trilogy. I'll be given a prompt, and I'll find something new to include in the writing that I wasn't expecting, and it takes my characters in a different direction. Okay, so Jenna is asking, if I'm an author and want to make a new editing career, should I consider this as one of the writing methods, and why? Well, when we're looking for feedback, I think it's really important to determine what kind of feedback the person is looking for. So sometimes, a concern that I've heard writers, particularly new writers who aren't used to being edited, what I've heard them express is that um, they they get lots of editing feedback about correcting their writing, but there's not enough addressed about what's working in the piece. So if they can establish that about their writing going in, they already know it's working in their writing. But also, I think, editors have different ways of responding to writing. And many of them do a great job of not just addressing, what needs to be corrected, but also what needs to be, uh, or sorry, what is working in the piece. And I think this is a great practice for an editor. Can you imagine being a part of a AWA group and writing together with people and having a long experience of looking at what's working in the piece? Then you, as an editor, would find those in the writing of others and being encouragement. A second question from Jenna. Does genre matter when you form your writing groups as a facilitator for AWA? Do you mix them, separate them, or let the participants dictate that for you? So, yeah, great question, Jenna. So, the AWA groups are really flexible. So, you have the option to do any of those things. You're right. Sometimes when everyone is writing in the same genre, they're able to identify things in the piece that they know work with that genre. And so they have additional things they can share. However, for many of the writing workshops, the facilitators are encouraged to have a variety of people who are from different backgrounds, who are at different writing levels, and that inclusion makes for a richer workshop. One of the things that I love about here and my in-person workshops here in my Bahio is that many of the expats here are well traveled, and they've lived in different countries, and they have many experiences. And so all of those different backgrounds from all of those places in the world, when it's a varied group, it adds richness and we can really learn from one another. Andrea is asking, um, where do you find your prompts? Any advice? This is a really important question because sometimes you're given prompts that are what I would term a closed prompt. So they're very specific and they kind of place you in a little bit of a writing box. So you just want to use prompts that are open-ended, ones that can take you anywhere. And they can be as simply as one word, write about winter. Winter can be a great way to, explore setting on the page, but winter can also be very metaphorical. And so even something as simple as one word. So I think, when it comes to prompts, just try, not to choose ones that say, put yourself in a on a park bench, but then everything goes dark and you can't see everything. And, and then they just kind of squeeze you into this little box and you're like, oh my gosh, what do I write? So, choose something open ended. This one today, remember that day. That can take you anywhere. Remember when is another good one. One that I like to use often is, write about a transformational moment, that time when something occurred for the character, so something real or imagined, that from that point on going forward, everything changed. So I have collected some prompts on my Pinterest page, so feel free to go there. I'll add that to the description, and you'll be able to access them. But choosing a line of poetry, often I'll start a writing workshop by reading a poem, and I'll ask the participants to choose the prompt. Choose one or two or three words from the prompt and include them in your writing. Choose one phrase, like we did today, choosing the first line. Oh, thank you very much. Yes, the information is something I've gathered from years of writing using this method. And so, if anyone has any questions, even after the event, who's not watching live, please feel free to ask. And thank you for the desire to come back and watch it in its entirety. Okay, so Jenna has given us a question that's a scenario. I failed English in high school and I do not read well. How helpful can the AWA method be to keep me writing consistently as I improve my writing voice? So you'll remember we talked about, one of our values is that we value the writing at the stage the writer is at, and we all have a starting place. And so, you know, you can start with a group of people who are have a similar education, and sometimes there's a comfort level in that for those who are beginning, and so it's okay to do that and then move on to groups that have a varied background. But this can be brought down, like as a teacher. I've been in classrooms where the students have writing challenges, and I use the prompts and ask the students to write just one sentence. Maybe writing for 10 minutes might be too much to ask. And then, maybe an hour later, I'll ask them to get out their page and I'll give them another prompt and ask them to write one sentence. And if I do that throughout the day, then what I would find is, the students at the end of the day would show me their piece of paper and they'd go, "Look, miss, I filled a whole page." And you can well imagine how empowering that is to them. This method has been used to encourage people who are living in low socioeconomic statuses who haven't had educational opportunity. It's used in prisons. It's used in healthcare facilities. All of these bring people who have a variety of writing levels. But imagine, starting out and when you're first writing and someone's telling you what's working in your writing. Okay, so I'm a teacher, so I'm allowed to say this. All that writing where teachers have to mark to certain things and they have to mark in pen, what you need to fix all the time. And then they give you your page back and it looks like it's bleeding because there's so much red all over the page. Sometimes we uh, need to have a space where we can write and just know what's working. And then the next time we write, we include that. But then we also heard what's working in someone else's page, and we include that. And so it's just a great way to grow together. Okay, so uh, yes, excellent, Jenna. Brick by brick, step by step, bird by bird, word by word. Yes, I'm an Anne Lamott fan too, so totally agree with that. Andrea says, um, great question, Jenna, the soul writer. This is the scenario in my college. The students are mostly struggling at writing and reading, but they want to create. So, Andrea, often there have been missed educational opportunities. I know this from having worked in English classes with adults. And I taught this in my classroom. We experience AWA writing together. I have a whole whole session on how to do that if you want to contact me. And it's amazing. The prompt that I would use in that situation was about the transformational moment because many of my students had had their lives interrupted by trauma or other things. And when they wrote new endings to their story, it actually enabled them to move forward with other parts of their learning. It was very encouraging and empowering to them. People who hadn't been able to work for a while were suddenly seeking employment, and it was incredible to see them not only learn how to write story, but also how that helped them personally. Okay, so Jen is also experiencing that for many of her students. So yeah, Jenna, if you want to look into how I did that in the classroom more, certainly I can send you that information. Although, knowing you, you're probably already really good at this. Yes, don't reinvent the wheel for sure. Okay, so I want to thank you, Jenna and Esty, and also Andrea for joining me. My apologies to those who weren't able to join the live stream because of that technical glitch. I hope some of you have taken time to watch the actual um, saved portion, and that may not have given you a chance to ask your comments, so please feel free to do that or email me. And thank you for joining me as we learn to write adventurously here at the AuthorTube Writing Conference. And I wish you happy writing.